Hi, my name's Hubwood, and today we will take a closer look at the brand new MSI Katana and the brand new MSI Sword series. So, let's go! So Nvidia just released the brand new RTX 3050 and 3050 Ti for laptops, and Intel released their new 11th generation Tiger Lake CPUs for laptops as well, and MSI decided to put both of them into this brand new MSI Katana and MSI Sword series. Well, as seen in the thumbnail, the MSI Katana is a black laptop and the MSI Sword is going to be the same laptop but in white. And a white gaming laptop, that just makes me go rrr. But unfortunately I was only able to get the black version, the MSI Katana, for testing, so we'll have to do with this one today. The model that we are specifically talking about today comes with a brand new Intel 11th generation, the i7-11800H, which is an 8-core 16-thread CPU by Intel, and it's a really good CPU, to be honest. It does have a theoretical all-core turbo of 4.2 GHz, which could not always be maintained in this laptop, but we'll come to that later. It also has a RTX 3050 Ti with 4 GB of DDR6 VRAM, and it is the 60-watt version of this GPU, which is quite important because there are going to be lots of different versions of this GPU considering the wattage, so the power that it needs, and also the resulting performance. It comes with 16 GB of fast 3200 MHz DDR4 RAM, which is upgradable, so you could swap those out and put in 32 or 64 GB if you like. It also comes with a 500 GB NVMe SSD, a 17-inch display with 144 Hz, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and a pretty small 150 watt power supply unit. Now let's talk about the chassis of this laptop first. It can easily be opened with one hand, if that's something that you like. And the stability of the screen, it's okay, but it could be a bit better, to be honest. The overall look of the laptop is, it's nothing special. It's practical, I would guess. It's all plastic, but it feels sturdy, and I guess it's just practical. It's easy to clean, and I guess it's some kind of robust material which is not going to get that much scratches very soon. It is only 2.5 centimeters high and weighs total of 2.3 kilograms, which is not that much for a 17-inch gaming laptop with some kind of decent hardware. Now, the IPS screen provides good viewing angles as expected, and it has around 217 nits only, which is okay for inside, but I would not use this laptop to work outside, at least not in the sun. The sRGB coverage is 63% and the Adobe coverage is 47%. The keyboard is pretty mediocre, it's okay, it's not special or nothing great, but I like the fact that MSI also added a small numpad over here, which could be a good compromise over not adding a numpad at all. By the way, it comes with red illumination, but no RGB though. The touchpad is alright as well, I did not have any issues. Besides, it's a small touchpad, so keep that in mind, and you need to press down quite a bit, which I don't mind, but if that's a problem for you, just take a note. The speakers on the bottom, they are there. They can get pretty loud, but the sound clearly lacks some kind of bass and volume. Unfortunately, MSI somehow decided to place a lot of the connections on the right side, which is a very questionable decision for me. I usually prefer to use a LAN cable at home. If working at my desk, I also use a second monitor and an external hard drive for installing many games for benchmarking, as well as headphones. And that way there's basically no room for ergonomically using a mouse in my right hand. And I just wished all the manufacturers would stop placing those connections on the right side. Even though I'm able to use a left-hand mouse, that's not an option while gaming usually. So on the right side we do have the LAN port, an HDMI port, USB-C 3.2 and a USB-A 3.2, as well as the headphone jack. And on the left side we have a USB a 3.2 and a USB 2.0 port. So on the right side we have 5 connections where 0 would be the way to go, and on the left side we do have the USB 2.0 port, which you usually use for a mouse. So I'm wondering if this is supposed to be a left-hand laptop, whatever, I don't know. The battery inside the thing has a capacity of 43 watt-hours, which is pretty average for such a big laptop, which is going to need quite a lot of power. And I was expecting short run times for the battery, but when I've tested it, something was off and I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the way it was. Watching YouTube at a brightness of 50% and using headphones with a loudness of 20%, I was only getting 90 minutes, which is way off and way too short, even for such a laptop. I'm not sure if it's because I did not use the battery for a few days to get warm, you know, to get the full capacity. Because even using idle mode, super battery saving mode by MSI, everything low and down, Wi-Fi off, I only got around 2 hours of battery mode, so something is off there. And when gaming on the battery, of course, the performance drops quite a lot and you only get around 40 minutes of gaming time. So MSI, hello, please fix this. But of course, keep in mind that a 17-inch 8-core 16-thread gaming laptop is not going to have great runtimes if the battery is that small. By the way, gaming will actually drain the battery a bit after a while of heavy gaming, so if you have a long gaming session, your battery could be less charged than when you started. And keep in mind that if you start gaming plugged in when the battery is completely empty, your performance might not be the same because the battery is not able to support the GPU and CPU or the PSU for that matter. By the way, this is what the integrated camera looks like and the integrated microphone sounds like. Now let's talk about the SSD, which is inside of this thing. Up front, unfortunately, there's only one port or one connection for a M.2 SSD inside of here. There's no second one and there's also no HDD connection, so you can only have one hard drive, meaning if you need to swap that out, you will completely need to copy the content of the one drive onto another, and yeah, that's not very user-friendly. The sequential reading speed of this disk was around 1800 megabyte per second and the sequential writing speed was around 900 megabyte, making it absolutely fast enough for everything, gaming and starting up, booting up, everything, but it's not top-notch. In PC Mark X, the laptop reached a total of 6,415 points. Now let's talk about the CPU, and if you wanted detailed general information about the i7 Tiger Lake CPU for laptops, and specifically the one I used in this laptop, I highly recommend Hardware Unboxed video about this, and I will also link the video in the description, so please make sure to check that one out if you're interested in a thorough test of this CPU. But let's just say it's a very fast gaming CPU with 8 cores and 16 threads, which is not able to reach the full potential inside of this laptop because there was some thermal throttling and some power throttling, nothing heavy, but the overall power is slightly off from what it should be. That resulted in temperatures around 90 degrees Celsius while gaming or rendering, so that's a bit too much. But it actually does help to run the fans at full speed via the MSI software, which is integrated. You can choose to always ramp them up. That's going to help with the thermals at least a bit. But nonetheless, this is a very, very good gaming CPU because it was able to maintain the frame times very smooth all the time. I basically never had any frame drops and lags. This is just, right now, this is just a very, very good gaming CPU. Basically, I'm a bit surprised that there were some thermal issues with this laptop because it has quite a lot of intake grills over here on the bottom. And it has 3 outtakes, one on the left side and 2 on the back. And the CPU and GPU have their own fans, which can be controlled separately but still, I guess it's just a bit too much for the heat pipes that have been built inside of this laptop. Which is kind of weird because the GPU actually uses around 60 watt, so that's more heat to dissipate, and the CPU only uses around 45 watts, and the CPU gets 90 degrees and the GPU is staying around 70 to 80 degrees. Okay, now let's have a look at Cinebench. In Cinebench R15, the CPU scored a multi-score of 1939 and a single score of 228. In Cinebench R20, it scored 4628 in multi, and the single score was 562. In Cinebench R23, it scored 12,365 in multi and 1477 in the single core benchmark. Now let's talk about the GPU that's built inside of this. Now, as said before, this laptop is equipped with a brand new RTX 3050 Ti, which is supposed to be an entry-level gaming GPU. Even though I would not necessarily entirely call it entry-level, because it's quite powerful. But the biggest problem of this GPU is that it only has 4 GB of VRAM, which is too small considering the pure performance that it has, resulting that in some games you will need to lower the details because otherwise the VRAM is full and then you get frame drops and stuttering. Even though the power of the GPU would be high enough to use those higher settings FPS-wise. Please note that I also used this laptop for quite a lot of GPU comparison videos, so please check them out as well. I will also link them in the description, comparing it with the GTX 1650, GTX 1060, the GTX whatever, you know. There's going to be some comparisons. I've also made a dedicated video on how much FPS you can gain when activating the DLSS feature that this RTX 3050 Ti actually offers, which is a great thing to be honest. So please make sure to check that one out as well. Before we start with the games, let's have a look at 3D Mark first. In Firestrike, it scored a total of 12,768 points with a graphics score of 14,185 and a physics score of 21,750. In TimeSpy, it scored a total of 5,757 points with a graphics score of 5,395 and a CPU score of 9,319. Now let's have a quick look on how this laptop performs in a variety of games. So, I was testing Cyberpunk 2077 on medium settings, and for this title I was also activating DLSS on the balanced option, which is basically free FPS in my opinion. Yes, the image loses a tiny bit of sharpness in this title, which in my opinion does not matter at all on a relatively small 17-inch laptop monitor. Thanks to the 16 GB of RAM and the great CPU, the experience was very smooth and very enjoyable. This is one of the most demanding games out there at the moment, and the Katana was doing great here in my opinion. I got an average of 65 FPS and a good 1% low of 38 FPS. In Call of Duty Warzone, I was getting around 113 FPS on average and a 1% low of 73 FPS when using a mix of medium and high settings, and since it's been added lately, I've also activated DLSS in balanced mode here, which clearly means free FPS once again. That was perfectly playable in my opinion, and thanks to the 144Hz display, it feels absolutely fluid and great. That's competitive material here, if you ask me. In Apex Legends, I was also getting a high average FPS of 95 when using the almost absolute high settings with a 1% low of 60 FPS. That means you could easily get over 100 FPS when reducing the settings for a bit. And since this game does not provide DLSS, what you see is pure rendering power here. Once more, a great experience in my opinion. Yeah, I know, this game is exactly 6 years old as of today, but I still love benchmarking it. For The Witcher 3 I was using ultra settings without hairworks and getting a great average of 77 FPS with a 1% low of 57 FPS, meaning you could easily lock the FPS to 60 and get a perfectly fluid game experience with ultra settings with a great looking game. thanks to the great CPU, this was one of the best The Witcher 3 experiences I've ever had when benchmarking, because this game just loves a great CPU to prevent stutters and frame drops. In GTA 5 I was getting an average of 116 FPS and a 1% low of 59 FPS with high settings. That's not that big of a surprise, I guess. I just wanted to add the game because I guess this title will still be played a lot on laptops like this one. Now in Red Dead Redemption 2 I was testing the game on medium settings with a bit of anti-aliasing, resulting in an average of 52 FPS over the course of this benchmark run, where I was riding a horse over the majority of the map. Considering the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 was getting more FPS than that due to DLSS, shows the potential of that feature. The 1% low was 40 FPS, and this is still a good experience, but to be honest I was hoping for a bit better result. Of course, fiddling around with the settings a bit could get you stable at 60 FPS on average. And the small 4GB VRAM would even allow to use higher textures in this game. I have to point out that while benchmarking and recording around 25 games for my other videos on this laptop, I actually sometimes had to crank down the settings a bit to prevent the small 4GB VRAM memory to overload, which would result in massive frame drops. This was, for example, happening in Cyberpunk, Watch Dogs Legion, Assassin's Creed Valhalla or Wolfenstein Youngblood. I know this is a bit of a letdown, but with a bit of tinkering around in the settings you can still get great optics and great experiences in every game that is available to this date. Just mind that in quite a few titles you won't be able to use a resolution higher than Full HD or maximum settings. I have to point out that in all my testings this laptop never crashed, there were never any issues, blue screens, freezing, whatever. It was just a good experience considering the stability. Considering the power draw, the 150 watt PSU which you get with this laptop is actually pretty small. And under full load while playing Fortnite, the laptop draws around 120 to 135 watts from the wall. Now conclusion. In Europe, in Germany, this laptop right now costs 1,300 euros, which is quite a bit too much. I would not buy a laptop for that kind of money with that hardware. It's not a bad laptop, that's not what I'm saying. It's just right now, for me, this would be too expensive. This could be totally different in the country where you live. For example, in the US, if you can get a laptop like this for $1,000, this could be a good deal in my opinion. Keep in mind that for around 300 euros more, you could get the RTX 3070 version of this laptop, which is quite significantly faster. And of course, you can get for 1,300, you can get other laptops with a Ryzen 7 and a RTX 2060 or something like that, which is going to be still a bit better. So besides the problem with the battery and the little heating problem with the CPU, which is not terrible, again, it's still a very powerful CPU and will be enough for all titles, for doing 4K video editing, for everything that you're going to do for the next few years. But it's still, it's throttling a bit, you need to know this, and the battery seems to have issues. Besides that, there were no problems with the laptop, and I enjoyed testing it. So that's all for today. If you liked the video, please make sure to hit that like button. If you loved it, please consider subscribing, because there are going to be more laptop tests like this and more GPU comparisons. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.